Rwandan defensive measures. Rwandan defensive measures. We're talking about by U.S. intelligence services and 4,000 to 7,000 Rwandan soldiers inside of the Congo, occupied Congolese territory, captured the city of Goma, killing at least an estimated 7,000 Congolese. Right? As a result of the occupation and the capture of Goma, we saw that there was a prison break in the midst of it, where 100 and something Congolese women were raped and burnt alive, right? So we're talking about mass crimes against humanity, right? Massive atrocities, right? Displacement of millions of Congolese.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Rwandan defensive measures. Are you serious?
Yes.
Right? In what universe does that those words even make sense? We're at the tail end, hopefully, of a 30-year war of aggression and plunder by U.S. ally Rwanda, right? That triggered the death of an estimated at least 6 million Congolese, according to the studies that are out there, right? What the United Nations says, if brought in front of a competent court in the UN Mapping Exercise Report, the Rwandan soldiers could be charged for crimes of genocide. So how do we arrive here? I guess we arrive here because it's a deal among local, regional, and global elites for their benefit, right? Tshisekedi gets to stay in power. Kagame, he gets off scot-free, no accountability, no justice. He gets to process Congo's minerals that he can sell to the European Union and elsewhere, right? And Trump and Rubio and Boulos, they get to bring their business people in, to invest.
Good evening. Happy Friday, everyone. And glad to be back. It's 6:01 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Time. And today we have a lot to cover. Didn't make it last weekend. It was 4th of July. Gotta respect the U.S. Independence Day, and also for myself also, right? Like to kind of simmer down and trying to digest everything that has been happening. So we have a lot to cover, a lot to talk. First thing is obviously the peace deal that we watched live. I was able to stream it, and together we were able to watch it and then break it down with folks that join us. Claude Gatibuke, that I salute, Jessica, and obviously our executive director of Friends of the Congo, Maurice Carney, who also joined us. He was the first to kind of give his impression to this deal that was signed, this peace deal that was signed. So today, what we're gonna do, we're gonna do an exercise of going line by line, right? Trying to now read it with y'all, read it together, and trying to break it down. And also deconstruct some of the notions that are out there regarding the mineral deal, regarding the peace deal. Is it really a mineral deal? Are we exaggerating? Are we too naive to think that will bring peace? We don't think that, but those who do. So we're gonna do this exercise. So the peace deal was signed on June 27th. It was in Washington D.C. in presence of Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, with the foreign ministers of the two countries. So we had DRC Minister of Foreign Affairs and then the Rwanda Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then from there, and that was something that we were not aware of. We didn't get the communication that they were going to actually meet Trump right after, but that happened. So as soon as we got the info that they were actually at the White House, that's when I streamed again with little comments on my part, just watching, like y'all watched what was going on, what Donald Trump was saying, and then after that I had another session regarding immigration, because that's also one of the second biggest things happening in the Congo world, because this is Congo Unfiltered here on Friends of the Congo's channels or platform. I'm not there yet, but we will, with your support. So 4th of July, that's when the one big beautiful bill was signed into law, voted at the House, voted at the Senate, back at the House, and then they agreed on the same version, and finally that passed. A lot has been said already. We discussed that in our previous show with attorney Niels Kinwani, who kind of like help us break it down in terms of what that means for, I would say, Congo. Obviously, it's Congo Unfiltered, but also for even like U.S. citizen. A lot about food stamps, about healthcare, about the future of immigration, right? In terms of funding that will go to ICE and the asylum process, deportation, and all of that. That was explained. That was prior to the bill being actually voted. But now it is confirmed that that bill passed and it was signed on July 4th. July 4th, we will dedicate another show for that. But today, back to the main reason why we are here, or why I'm here with you, tuning in, and thank you all for always being faithful and watching us. We're gonna break down the deal, the peace accord, right? But before I do that, not sure if y'all saw that the DRC signed a really, really juicy contract with Barcelona. I am not doing, and that's reported in Jeune Afrique. I'm gonna show the version on just because of copyright, but I'm gonna show the version of TV5 because it's accessible, it's open information. But the DRC Minister of Sports signed a partnership contract with FC Barcelona. I happen to be a fan of FC Barcelona, by the way, as well as Arsenal. Um, but something very important about this, and I'm gonna tell you all because why we need to talk about this, why am I really concerned, and that's TV5 that also reported the same news, because we are talking about this in a context of occupation. The Congo is occupied right now. They signed a peace deal, but peace has not come back yet. You know, Congolese people still living under the sound and the threats of bullets and being forcibly displaced. Um, uh, Rwanda still have a stronghold on I would say, over 100 territories, including the two largest cities of the Eastern Congo, Bukavu and Goma. And the DRC was unable to protect the civilians. The DRC government, the Congolese government, was unable to protect the civilians. They were unable to protect the territorial integrity of the country. Um, they had to hire even mercenaries, which is, by the way, illegal under international law. They had to sign agreements with non-state armed groups that, by the way, have been committing war crimes. Now they're called Wazalendo, a bunch of armed groups within that Wazalendo. So the DRC government failed in that aspect. And there were reports of the Ugandan government starting to deal with M23. They actually opened the borders uh, with the Kivu and places where right now that are under Rwandan occupation, right? So Uganda is decided, committed to deal directly with M23, which, by the way, has been documented, and I've talked about this on this show, that the M23 was no longer a conventional or a traditional militia groups. Not those stereotypical militia groups that you see or that you've heard or learn in history or in your classes with like Jordans and AK-47 from the 1960s. Now, they have sophisticated weapons, sophisticated equipment, and we talking about GPS jammer. We talking about surface to air, air to surface missiles. We're talking about crazy weapons that were able to defeat the United Nations forces, our presence in the Congo, MONUSCO, that the head of the head of the mission, the MONUSCO mission in the Congo, said that they that the M23 was more equipped than them. Can you imagine that? That the South African forces, SNDF, present at that time, because now they all left the country, in Goma, they were there, they were defeated. The South African government was unable to fly and provide ammunitions and support, even air support, because of those GPS jammers that I talked about. A lot of weapons, including Israeli weapons, were found in the Kivu, in the hand on the hand of the M23. So there were obviously, I'm trying to paint the picture, heavily equipped M23 took over Goma. And the government, the Congolese government, has been unable to do that. And in the midst of all of that, in the midst of signing a peace deal with Rwanda, who has been waging a war, a 30-year war of aggression and plunder on civilians, on the Congo. So the DRC government signed a contract with them that is controversial. We will talk about this. And the idea that the Congolese government found in the midst of this chaos was to sign contracts with not just FC Barcelona, they also signed a contract with Monaco, AS Monaco. So here it says TV5 Mons, Mons stands for World. DR Congo signs major contract with FC Barcelona. The Congolese Minister of Sport has signed a new partnership with the European football club FC Barcelona, a 43 million euros contract that offers numerous benefits and significant visibility to the Central African country. And again, I'm not against that particular contract being signed or any of that. I'm against about the timing, right? Because we're talking about making the DRC visible. The DRC, and I'm going to continue reading, is continuing its partnership in the football market by signing a new contract with FC Barcelona. This new collaboration, which offers a large number of advantages to the African country, is said to have cost 43 million euro, excluding taxes, over 4 seasons, according to the revelation from Jeune Afrique. A first transfer of 10 million euros has already been paid, right? That's what is being said. And first, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been signing a string of major contracts with European football clubs in recent months, seeking to boost its international image. AS Milan, AS Monaco already signed partnership with the Central African country in the end of June. Both contracts over or are for 3 years. AS Milan will receive 14 million per season. AS Monaco will receive 1.6 million per season. All 3 clubs will feature the slogan "Explore the DRC, Heart of Africa" on the jerseys. I'm gonna pause there. Like, explore DRC, explore what? In the context of occupation. I'm probably gonna keep the comments for myself because I don't want people to think that I'm doing Congo bashing, but I'm really trying to be civil right now in terms of having 7.1 million Congolese people displaced. And that was before the fall of Goma. Right now, we're talking about 500,000 people. We're talking about an estimated 7,000 people died, civilians. These are conservative numbers. That were first reported when Goma fell, I think early this year. The civil society report a few weeks ago, and I talked about this. I talked about that in this show. 11,000 dead. That's the Congolese civil society. And they're worried about bringing folks in the Congo to explore the DRC. The DR Congo will also benefit from several advertising spaces for 2 minutes per match and per support with the Spotify Camp Nou, Barcelona's new renovated stadium. I'm a big fan of FC Barcelona. You told me this outside of the context of war, I would have been as happy. I would have been myself cheering the Congolese government. But we are, I won't even say at war because that won't be fair. The Congo is right now occupied. Human Rights Watch described those region, the Kivu region, as occupied Congolese territories. And the Congolese government seems to be worried about having a slogan, explore the DRC heart of Africa, appear on team's jersey and then on the team stadium. What I find really interesting, and that's the benefits that are mentioned in Jeune Afrique. It says that the DRC will benefit from several advertising platform with 2 minutes per match being said, and per platform in a brand new Spotify camp. The FC Stadium is due to reopen on August 10th after a long closure for renovation to increase its capacity. The country will benefit from a VIP lounge to invite partners and organize corporate events. VIP lounge. So this is not even for the average or regular Congolese citizen, right? Who can afford? They live with less than $2 a day anyways, right? So this is really done for the elites, those who can afford to even go watch those games. And I've been to a Barcelona game once. It's a lot of money, right? So I'm really, really, really concerned about the priorities here. According to the source close to the matter, the contract details a host of benefits, including jerseys, tickets, and VIP box seats. It's crazy. The contract also allows the DRC. I'm not reading TV5 months anymore. The contract also allows the DRC to use the image of FC Barcelona players and even meet them during highly restricted sessions. On the training side, FC Barcelona will organize four 5 day training camps per year at its facilities to train up to 50 Congolese players. So now we go into the amount. According to Jeune Afrique, all these benefits come at the cost of $43 million euros, excluding tax over 4 seasons. Initial transfer 10 million euros has already been dispersed, according to our information. The price will then increase by 500,000 euros per season, reaching 11.5 million million euro for the 2028-2029 season. The contract will end on June 30th, 2029. We do not comment on any matter that has not been officially announced. This is what FC Barcelona told to Jeune Afrique. That's the information of today. In the context of occupation, the Congolese government thought that it is smart to pay, spend, waste 43 million euros. So that's it for the news of the day. Besides the fact that Uganda says they're going to normalize their relationship with M23, treating M23 as a state, right? That's essentially what's going on. There was another news this week about the demands of M23 in Doha, because when they signed this peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda, the Republic of Rwanda, on June 27th, 2025, a couple of weeks ago, they said, and we will talk about this, that regarding M23, which by the way was only mentioned 3 times, literally 3 times. Not sure if you can see that, but 3 times M23 was mentioned. But FDLR, which seems to be a concern for Rwanda, because it's the armed groups, they have been killing civilians, Congolese civilians, I must say, was mentioned 43 times. So they said when it comes to M23, y'all will discuss the government, the Congolese government, and the M23. You guys should talk because you guys are brothers and sisters. Talk in Doha, Qatar. But when it comes to the FDLR, which is a threat to the Rwandan security, and Rwanda has the right to defend itself, a new term came out, defensive measures. We will talk about that. That the DRC government has the obligation to neutralize the FDLR, but the Congolese government about Congolese national security will deal with the question of M23 in Doha, Qatar. And it has been reported that in Doha, Qatar, the M23 made a really odd request. They said they will not leave the occupied Congolese territory, like the territories that are occupying with the help of the Rwandan government, for at least 8 years. That's what they put on the table. That was reported. So 8 years, that's what they're asking. We are not going to withdraw until at least 8 years. But the UN report, which was leaked, is still, I don't think it's public yet. Last time I checked, they said that the Paul Kagame is aiming to annex the Kivus. And we've been saying that for years. Last month we discussed, it was actually a few weeks ago, when I hosted the head of Amnesty International for Africa, Kate Hickson. I talked. She broke down the report of Amnesty International report, but I also talked about. I mentioned during that show one of the report from Human Rights Watch that was essentially saying, not essentially, they were clearly saying, so that there was no ambiguity, and I think I need to show that the Rwandan government, M23, was forcibly removing civilians, Congolese civilians, and even refugees, Rwandan refugees that are present in the Kivu, occupied by obviously M23, to Rwanda. That was a really what Human Rights Watch is telling us, published on June 18th. M23 armed groups forcibly transferring civilians. And let me see the part where they actually start, like here. For additional details on deportation, please see below. The people transferred. Since the resurgence of the M23 in late 2021, Congolese and Rwandan armed force, along with the armed groups they support, have displaced hundreds of thousands of people in North Kivu and South Kivu, often multiple times over prolonged periods. I'm looking for the particular place where they actually say that. Okay. Of the people forcibly moved, oh yeah, right here. Many of the displaced people interviewed, let me see, y'all need to see that. Many of the displaced people interviewed who returned to Karenga in February had fled ahead of the M23's capture of the area in November 2023. The M23 provided no reason for expelling the population, although some sources thought the decision was related to suspected FDLR members in the area. Interviewees said that although some of the people formerly displaced from Karenga were of Rwanda origin, many were Congolese citizens or had lived in the Congo their entire lives. Of the people forcibly moved from Sake on May 12, 2025, the M23 transferred some of the men and later the relative to the Stade de l'Unité, Unity Stadium in Goma. The M23 military spokesperson Willy Ngoma presented 181 men at the stadium to the media, calling them Rwandan subjects, even though they had Congolese documents. Witness said the M23 burned people's Congolese electoral card, the main form of identification in Congo, and told people perceived to be of Rwandan origin to return to Rwanda. This, in international law, is called ethnic cleansing. Taking away people's documentation that proves that they are citizens of the Congo, forcing them to go to a country they have never been. Congolese citizenship is difficult to establish due to the absence of functional national ID system and decades of cross-border population movement driven by both conflict and economic opportunities between Congo and Rwanda. That's here. People marked for deportation were transferred to the is that C? I think it's CCLK Transit Center, which the Congolese National Commission for Refugees, Commission Nationale pour les Réfugiés, and the UNHCR used for Rwandan refugee repatriations under the 2010 tripartite agreements on voluntary return between UNHCR, Rwanda, and Congo. This is what we learn. UNHCR noted in its response to Human Rights Watch that refugee repatriations must be voluntary, safe, and carried out in dignity to comply with the principle of non-refoulement. Can't say that in English. The international legal prohibition against returning people to risk of persecution, torture, or other serious harm. But people at the center said that even though UNHCR agents interviewed them about their origin, UNHCR did not give them a choice about being sent to Rwanda. A Congolese woman said that UNHCR does what they want with us. We don't have a choice. This is a war crime, ladies and gentlemen, people, that the United States, not the United States, the United Nations, apologize, the UNHCR that is in charge of refugees, essentially, is in complicity with the M23 and the Rwandan government, forcibly removing Congolese people from their homes, from their lands. And the M23 said, we need 8 years before removing. But what can I say? Because the Congolese government signed a peace deal. So we had peace, right? So let's dive. I think I've spent more time than I wanted about the introduction and kind of like paved the way to this conversation. We're gonna skip the preamble. Y'all can just go and read it. I agreed to be bound by the following provisions. 1, territorial integrity and prohibition of hostilities. The parties agree to the following terms to ensure respect for territorial integrity and the promotion of peaceful relations. respect for the Democratic Republic of the Congo's territorial integrity, hate when I'm getting those notifications. Okay. Back to what I was saying. Respect for the Democratic Republic of the Congo's territorial integrity, disengagement of forces / lifting of defensive measures by Rwanda, right? The parties agreed to implement the harmonized plan for the neutralizations of the FDLR and disengagement of forces / lifting of defensive measures by Rwanda, CONUPS of October 31st, 2024, as provided for this agreement. So really quick here. So for the Congolese territories to be respected, for the Congolese territorial integrity to be respected, the deal talks about a disengagement of forces, plural, right? Many forces, and then / lifting of defensive measures by Rwanda. So there are two things here. This / either mean that you can use, and again, that's the writing consultant kicking in or taking over. Disengagement of forces. This / either means that right? This disengagement of forces can also be read as a lifting of the defensive measure by Rwanda, or that the disengagement of forces is conditioned by the lifting of defensive measure by Rwanda. Either way, the key word here, it's only one word. It's this preposition, by. As long as Rwanda does not lift its defensive measure, the Congolese territorial integrity will not be respected. That's something that I want you all to actually understand. And then the parties agreed to implement the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and disengagement of forces / lifting of defensive measures by Rwanda. Same thing here, right? Whose job is it to neutralize the FDLR? We are in the Congolese territory, though occupied right now, but it's in the DRC. It's in the DRC. So to neutralize forces that are within the Congolese border, that is the jurisdiction of the Congolese government, right? But here it says that the parties agreed to implement the harmonized plan. So we're going to read about that plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces / and the lifting of defensive measures by Rwanda. Okay. 2. Respect for the Republic of Rwanda's territorial integrity. Neutralization of the FDLR. The parties agreed to implement the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces, lifting and defensive measure by Rwanda, CONUPS. CONUPS comes up a lot, so I think it's important to know what CONUPS is, and it's in the annex, so I'm going to read it. Give me a second. Okay, I found it. It's in the annex. If you go back to the annex, right? Appendix A. Concept of operation for the harmonized plan for neutralization of the FDLR and disengagement of forces / lifting of defensive measures of Rwanda. Context, I'm not going to read that context to you. Y'all can read, but it's in Appendix A, right? 1.3 says a series of ministerial meetings was held between the Foreign Minister of the DRC and Rwanda in Rwanda began on March 21st, were facilitated by the Angola counterparts. So that happened, that took place in Angola. The fifth and final meetings was held on October 12, 2024. That I believe that's when Paul Kagame did not show up. to examine the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces, and the review of Rwanda's defensive measure adopted by the three countries' intelligence experts in Rubavu on August 29th and 30th, 2024. 1.4, October 12th, the fifth ministerial meeting on security and peace in Eastern DRC was held in Luanda, Angola, and addressed the following: the respect of the ceasefire, the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces, and the review of Rwanda defensive measure plan. I think I'm going to skip this. The political objectives, point 2, right? It talks about the objective of CONOPS: reestablish a climate of trust between the DRC and Rwanda through the neutralization of the FDLR by the DRC and the disengagement of forces, removal of defensive measure by Rwanda. 2, create a safe and secure environment that promotes the renewal of socio-economic activities. 3, ensure the lasting peace and stability in the region, as well as respect for human rights. 4, ensure protection for all citizens of both countries. 5, ends hate speech and verbal attacks. The strategic objectives of the CONOPS: 1, defeat the FDLR, armed groups, and its supporters. 2, protect the local population and infrastructure. 3, ensure the return of displaced people to their place of origin. 4, maintain control of natural resource use sites. Point 4 of the CONOPS, the desired strategic military outcomes: de-escalation of armed conflicts in Eastern DRC, okay? Safe areas of population centers, safe population, free circulation of people and goods, lower tension between the DRC and Rwanda. Desired final end state: the threats of the FDLR in the DRC is eradicated. That's the first one, okay? The Rwanda defense measures are lifted. First, you neutralize the threats of the FDLR, then the Rwanda defense measure are lifted. The state authorities is reestablished, the Congolese authority, right? Trust between the DRC and Rwanda is reestablished. Congolese refugees are repatriated and resettled in the DRC, and Rwandan refugees are repatriated. I can't pronounce that word. Sent back and resettled in Rwanda. And then finally, peace, stability, and development are reestablished in Eastern DRC, and the two countries become good neighbors. I really want you all to pay attention how this question of refugees for the desired final end state comes at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th point. But I read to you a report from Human Rights Watch from June 18th, how the M23 has started to send back people, Congolese people, to Rwanda. And Rwandan people, apparently, there was also this move, Rwandan people, Rwandan refugees also to Rwanda. We don't care about neutralizing the FDLR, which I'm also going to talk about how the FDLR has been used. And that's also what we find in this current report, the UN Group of Expert reports, and also previous one as back as 2003, I believe, that talks about how the Rwandan government is recycling FDLR. Once they're neutralized, sent to Rwanda, somehow they're being retrained or reprogrammed, sent back to the Congo within armed groups. That has been proven. Precondition for success: intelligence, management, improved coordination between the different forces, close collaboration between different stakeholders, support from the regional and international communities, effective influence operations, raising awareness among the population. Missions, point 7, right? There are 1, 2, 3, 4 missions for the CONOPS that the DRC must do or must accomplish. The DRC must neutralize the FDLR. So I talked about how even conceptually, because the FDLR are in Congo's territory, that is the Congolese government's jurisdiction to neutralize the FDLR. Forget about what I said. It's also written right there that the DRC shall neutralize the FDLR. DRC neutralize the FDLR. Imperative. Neutralize the FDLR. You must neutralize the FDLR. Promote the repatriation of FDLR members to Rwanda. Guarantee the same FDLR members that I mentioned are being recycled and sent back within M23 forces, CNDP forces, and you name them. Guarantee the condition for lasting peace and stability in the Great Lakes. Protect this population and ensure the return of displaced person to the place of origin. 4, mission that this CONOPS or this peace deal, because this is part of the appendix, the DRC must do. Look at the mission for Rwanda, who is invading, who is occupying, who is killing, who is plundering for the CONOPS. 2, only 2, disengaged forces leave the defense measures put in place by Rwanda, who is in deep Congolese territory. But they still had the audacity to say defensive measures when 7,000 to 12,000 troops, documented by United Nations group of experts, said by even US intelligence, reported by NBC, The Guardian. The Rwandan president himself, when asked where his troops were, like on CNN, he didn't say they're not in Congo. He said he doesn't know because he didn't want to say on CNN, no, it's a lie. The Rwanda Defense Forces are not in the Congo. He didn't say that. He said, I don't know. Can I find that? This is, let me see. Why is it like this?
Congo and President Tshisekedi. This interview is likely to anger the Democratic Republic of Congo and President Tshisekedi even more. It does not bring them any closer to any kind of agreement and a way forward.
So let me ask this directly, Mr. President. Today, on the 3rd of February, does Rwanda currently have any troops at all in Eastern DRC?
I don't know.
You're the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, there are many things I don't know. But if you want to ask me, is there a problem in Congo that concerns Rwanda and that Rwanda would do anything to protect itself?
Let's do it again.
Eastern directly, Mr. President. Today, on the 3rd of February, does Rwanda currently have any troops at all in Eastern DRC?
I don't know.
You're the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, there are many things I don't know. But if you want to ask me,
he doesn't know, right? He said he doesn't know. Sure. So back to our conversation. That was just on the side. Disengagement forces lift the defense measures put in place by Rwanda. Ensure the social reintegration of demobilized FDLR ex-combatants repatriated to Rwanda. It says social reintegration. It didn't say send them back to the Congo and fight with weapons, right? But that's what Rwanda has been doing for decades. But again, for this CONOPS, which is, oh my God, I lost it. It was 0.6. Concept of operation. What was the full title of this thing is Concept of Operations for the harmonized plan for neutralization of the FDLR and the disengagement of forces lifting of defensive measures of Rwanda, right? And only these two. So again, the DRC has to neutralize the FDLR. That's part of the mission. Who, as per many documents, are essentially right now in zones that are under M23 occupations. And there were some argued, and I can see the point because, as I mentioned at the beginning, truthfully, right, it's been documented as well that the Congolese government collaborated with also armed groups, not state armed groups, which is one, a violation of the Congolese own constitution or laws, and also a violation of international law. And some Congolese folks not gonna like what I'm saying. The FDLR has been written black on white that the FDLR were part of that coalition. So pro Kagame or pro M23 said that no, they're not under the FDLR, are not in territories in control of the M23. They are part of the FRDC, the Congolese army. So they are not in Goma, they are not in Bukavu, they are not in those territories. They are in places that we do not control yet. And I'm saying yet because that's very dangerous, because he talks here about disengaging or lifting defensive measures. He doesn't say anything about Rwanda expanding his defensive measures. Because what if Rwanda thinks that they needs to go in Katanga for the defensive measure? What happens then? Because that's where the FDLR are, presumably, right? What if they say we need to go deep into Province Orientale or Equateur? He says to disengage, and he says when to disengage, but he doesn't tell them not to further or exacerbate the situation, right? But also on another point that I want to mention is that it talks about disengaging forces. It talks about the Congolese government, and that's why I think that it is a mistake to have signed such a document that talks about defensive measure when Rwanda, as I explained, is in deep Congolese territory, that the Congolese needs to first neutralize the FDLR. The second point that I want to mention about the FDLR, and I already did, is that the FDLR has been recycled by the Rwandan government themselves multiple times in history. So this game of neutralizing the FDLR, recycling them by Rwanda and sending them back in Congo can continue because it has for the past 30 years. So this can again continue for 8 years like the M23 asked, or more, or less, if democracy finally happens in Rwanda and Paul Kagame somehow is being removed. Or even in the Congo, we also have a different leadership that will not have, or that would never endorse defensive measures as a language to justify Rwanda in your Congolese, in your territory, right? So it says ensure the social reintegration, but like I mentioned, that hasn't been done fully. So implementation of CONOPS, and I think that's very important concept of operation CONOPS, intention, neutralize the FDLR and lift the Rwanda defensive measure. The FRDC must, neutralize the FDLR while the RDF disengages forces / lift Rwanda's defensive measures in 4 phases. And then they broke it down into 4 phases. Phase 1, analysis of the level of threats posed by the FDLR. briefing of the progress of activities, locating the FDLR and the equipment, raising awareness in local communities, locating and sharing information about FDLR, sharing information on defense measures put in place by Rwanda, cessation of sporadic cross-border operation by Rwanda, and then phase 2, conduct of operations. Neutralization of the FDLR and its splinter groups, lifting of Rwanda defense measures and halting sporadic cross-border operations, jointly evaluating implementation, and then phase 3, the joint evaluation by the DRC and Rwanda of the plan of having the RCD and its partner neutralize the FDLR. I'm confused what they mean by RCD here. Joint evaluation by the DRC and Rwanda of activity related to lifting the defensive measure taken by Rwanda. And then four phase, the last one, stabilization, demobilization, repatriation, and reintegration of FDLR ex-combatant, strengthening trust and a peaceful environment between the DRC and Rwanda, and normalizing bilateral relations between the DRC and Rwanda. Timeline, very important. Let's see. Did they say how long Rwanda has to do this, or Congo? Nope. It says preparation of activities. There is literally no precise timeline. D plus 7, D to D plus 15. So whenever this D is, the day is, that's not being set yet. That's when the phase 1 could happen. So it's really unclear when this plan to actually neutralize that will lead to Rwanda removing itself from the Congolese territory as per the UN Security Council Resolution 2773. It's unclear when this day is. It says that the neutralization, that's funny because we're in 2024, right? We're in 2025 right now. It says here on point 10, the neutralization of the FDLR and the lifting Rwandan defensive measure must be complete within 3 months to comply with the harmonized plan for the neutralization of the FDLR and disengagement of forces, lifting of defensive measure Rwanda adopted by military intelligence expert in Rubavu on August 30th, 2024. So they agree on that last year. We will see. But this was what the CONOPS is here, right? So for the Rwanda territorial integrity, which they are saying that both parties agreed that Rwanda territorial integrity must be respected, and of course, but a question that people should ask themselves: has the Congolese government ever invaded Rwanda? Let's ask that genuine question. For Rwanda's territorial integrity to be written, people might argue that they're talking about the FDLR. When was the last time? That's a second question folks should be asking. When was the last time the FDLR crossed into Rwanda from the Congo and create chaos and kill people? When? Right? Peaceful resolution of disputes. The parties agree that differences shall be resolved through process established by this agreement. Of course, prohibition of hostile acts. The parties agree to refrain from any acts of aggression. The parties agree not to engage in, support, or condone any military incursion or other acts, whether direct or indirect, that threaten the peace and security, or that undermine the sovereignty or territorial integrity of other parties. Again, the question that I asked: when was the last time the Congolese government went to Rwanda as an act of aggression? And even the collaboration that I mentioned by the Congolese government, that I condemn with all my heart, of using non-state armed groups instead of promoting a Republican army, the FRDC, violating international law by paying non-state armed groups, the same militia groups that have been accused of human rights violation and war crimes. But that collaboration happened only after Rwanda had occupied the Congo. I'm not condoning what the Congolese government is doing. I'm saying it's wrong, but I'm also saying that let's not be disingenuous by forgetting that this collaboration that the Congolese government is being accused of, rightfully so, only happens after the Rwandan government had invaded and occupied Congolese territories. Since 2022, when Bunagana fell, that's the border town with Uganda, right? So these are the questions, like when you read these are the questions that you should be asking yourself, because then if we're not able and properly able to ask those questions, and then you as the person who represent the Congo or a third party reading this agreement, one might think that it is the Congolese government that is also engaged in violating the Rwanda integrity, that it is the Congolese government invading Rwanda, right? So prohibition of support of hostile acts and armed groups, I talked about that. The party shall not allow any military or other hostile activities against each other on or from their respective territories, or provide support for such activities abroad. To that end, the parties undertake to work to take any and all measures necessary to ensure that such activity shall not be initiated, planned, or carried out, directed, or financed from their respective territories toward each other. Francis Mwamba said, DRC does not have problem with Rwanda. Amen, brother. You're right. So, territorial scope. The prohibition of hostile acts applies without geographical restriction, regardless of the location of the armed forces involved. I agree. Responsibility with respect to non-state armed groups. The party shall take all possible measures. Let me fix my mic. Regardless of the location, yes, responsibility with respect to non-state armed groups. The party shall take all possible measures to ensure that all armed groups within the conflict area cease engaging in hostilities that are inconsistent with the prohibition of hostilities established in this agreement, right? Protection of civilians and humanitarian personnel. The parties shall facilitate the free movement of civilians, including humanitarians. The parties must comply with international humanitarian law, including the implementation of this agreement. This one. The parties shall facilitate the free movement of civilians, including humanitarians. What do you think happens when M23, who was given by Rwanda, GPS, jammered, right? Like literally a gadget able to jam GPS from airplanes, at the point that not just military airplanes from South Africa, even from the Congo, were unable to move into that area, but also humanitarians, right? When people like y'all have been doing, not just to Friends of the Congo, to many way that you could, right? Donating, and not just in terms of like individual, but even organizations, even the United Nations, MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping forces, were also unable to provide foods to civilians because of M23. So, yes. And also I mentioned about the human rights article about how they are forcing Congolese people to be removed from their home and then to be sent to Rwanda, a country they have never been. 2, disengagement, disarmament, and integration of non-state armed groups. To promote an enduring end to the conflict and to unlock the economic potential of the region, the parties shall support the ongoing negotiations between the DRC and the AFC/M23 under the mediation of the state of Qatar in Doha in efforts to disarm and demobilize non-state armed groups. These shall include the following: adding state support to armed groups. The party shall immediately and unconditionally cease any support to non-state armed groups except as necessary to facilitate implementation of these agreements. Again, that's really odd. Except as necessary to facilitate the implementation of these agreements. So the Rwandan government could say, we are not going to cease our support to the M23 because they need us to neutralize the FDLR, right? They need us to protect the civilians that, by the way, we have been accused of killing, raping. But this right there, right? Disengagement in a manner sequenced and coordinated with the disengagement forces and as provided in other forthcoming agreement, the party shall support the disengagement, disarmament, and integration of non-state armed groups as provided by other agreements or processes and the disarmament, demobilization, community reintegration stability process, and the joint security coordination mechanism as set out in section 3 of this agreement. Sequence, and I read to you those sequence, how they were established and agreed upon by both parties. Conditional integration into security forces. This is very, very important. And as a Congolese person, as a human rights, you would ask yourself, why would the Congolese government agree to this? Conditional integration into security forces. Any potential reintegration of combatant into the armed forces of the DRC and the Congolese National Police shall be carried out in a rigorous, individualized, and conditioned manner on case-by-case basis, based on clear criteria, including moral and physical fitness, in particular respect for the absence of serious violation of international humanitarian law, and loyalty to the states and its institution. This paragraph is very problematic for multiple reasons. I'm only going to mention 2, right? Let me see if I can go back. If we go back to what the same agreement is asking Rwanda to do, right? It says regarding the FDLR, who is I would say, I shouldn't say the equivalent, but please bear with me, equivalence in terms of both are non-state armed groups, both actors are committing war crimes. But obviously, M23 is more because they actually are occupying territories in the Congo. The FDLR is not, has never been able to since 2002 when they were created. But to neutralize the FDLR, which seems to be a national security threat for Rwanda, it says ensure the social reintegration of the demobilized FDLR. That's what this accord is asking Rwanda to do. It says that, hey, we're going to neutralize the FDLR, but once they neutralize, integrate them in the social life. It doesn't tell Rwanda to integrate them in its army, though Rwanda is doing that as part of a separate unit. There are 100% being sent to the Congo to continue to perpetuate that circle of violence. But it doesn't say that you need to include them in the police force. You need to include them in the Rwandan police force, in Rwandan intelligence apparatus, in the Rwandan defense force. It doesn't say that. But for Congo, it does. It says conditional integration into security forces, but we have seen that before, right? Because M23, though they have been brought back to life for many reasons, they probably won't have to dig into these in 2021, but they actually started in 2012 actually. And I'm really, maybe I don't want to lose track, but in 2012, the United Nations group of experts told us that the chain of command of M23 at that time was the General James Kabarebe, who is currently Rwanda co-minister of foreign affairs, but he's in charge of regional cooperation, right? Not the one that signed. The one that signed is like foreign affairs, in charge of international cooperation. James Kabarebe right now, he's in charge of regional cooperation. So the Great Lake region, Congo affairs, and you name them, right? Just within Africa, just within the region. In 2012, he was mentioned by UN experts that he was the chain of command, that the chain of command was that he was the commander of the M23. And besides being this, that's the current position that he holds right now. He also used to be Paul Kagame's advisor in charge of defense, right? He was his advisor. He was also in the army, a high-ranking official in the Rwandan military, right, for the longest time. And in 1997, James Kabarebe was the Congolese army chief of staff. I'm not making this up. The person that you see today as being one of Rwanda's minister was in 1997 when Laurent Désiré Kabila and AFDL, which was an armed groups backed by Rwanda, supported by Rwanda, with weapons, with money, with boots on the ground, overthrew President Mobutu. And when he overthrew President Mobutu and was able to rename Zaire to Congo, James Kabarebe was the Congolese army chief of staff. That's James Kabarebe. Besides James Kabarebe, there was the AFDL backed by Rwanda, and after the AFDL, Alliance des Forces pour la Libération Démocratique du Congo, I think, AFDL, Alliance des Forces Démocratiques pour la Libération du Congo. In French, I think anyways, I'm not gonna translate that in English. Apologies, but it was an alliance created supposedly to overthrow the dictatorship that was in place by Mobutu. It was there for 32 years, right? And when Kabila, Laurent Désiré Kabila, literally stopped beefing with Rwanda by asking Rwandan citizen and Rwandan army to go back, I would say Rwandan army to go back. And there was actually Félix Tshisekedi's father, late father, who passed away a few years ago. Maybe weeks before Laurent Désiré Kabila's address to the nations and asking the Rwandan force to go home, Etienne Tshisekedi went on TV and asked, because there was report of human rights violation, of Congolese people being treated in a really inhumane way. So Etienne Tshisekedi, who was the head of the opposition at that time, right? He went on TV and literally asked and literally said to the Rwandan government to give to the Congo the bill of the partnership with Laurent Désiré Kabila. And he said that we will pay for it. Give us the bill. We will pay for it, but please go home. Because of how the women were treated, the children were treated, and also the people in general. And weeks after that, if not months, few months, Laurent Désiré Kabila made essentially the same call, asking Rwanda to go home, to the Rwandan army to go home. When that happened, in 1998, that's when the RCD, another armed groups backed by Rwanda, was created. And you have someone, maybe you heard about that, and if you haven't, the UN report that just came out talks about Laurent Nkunda. I think y'all need to actually have Laurent Nkunda Batware. He is literally the person who kind of like created the CNDP, right? Like we have the RCD, and after the RCD 1998, there was the RCD, and Laurent Nkunda, because it's only one person that I'm going to pick, I'm going to actually mention three names. Laurent Nkunda, it was the commander of the CNDP. And when the CNDP was defeated, he's going to find himself in Rwanda. And he's still in Rwanda until today. That actually we learned in a UN group of expert report that the Rwandan government wants to bring him back in the game because of all the internal issues that I have right now with Nanga, with Makenga, you name them. But apparently he's gonna be brought back. But something really interesting about Laurent Nkunda, right? Let's see if I can have. So something very interesting about Laurent Nkunda, just like Bosco Tanganda, who's a co-founder, one of the co-founder of the M23 in 2012, he fought alongside Paul Kagame, the FPR of Paul Kagame, and then joined the AFDL, backed by Rwanda, and then joined the RCD, backed by Rwanda, and then created the CNDP, backed by Rwanda. It says that he's Congolese citizen, born in Masisi, North Kivu, right? And then there is Sultani Makenga, another one. Sultani Makenga, I think there is, hold on, give me a second, guys. Y'all need a visual. Advanced search. Makenga, oops. So what I'm saying is very important, because when they're asking, when people are asking the Congolese government to somehow allow those people who are part of M23 today to join or rejoin the Congolese forces, the army, it is an issue. It talks about loyalty, and I read that to you guys. And I'm showing to you that these people never had absolutely zero loyalty toward the Congolese nation, not even the government. Forget about the Congolese government. Fuck them. Congo Unfiltered. It is about the loyalty to the people, the loyalty to the land, right? And you have someone like Laurent Kunda that I'm showing you guys right now, who had the audacity to say that there is no, that's Sultani Makenga, but Laurent Kunda before that had the audacity to say that there was no life in the Congo when there are people living there, human being living there. And he said that because he was asked, how come you're creating all of this chaos? He said there was no life here. I cannot destroy what's not there. What do you mean you cannot destroy what is not there? People are living there, right? So, found it. This is straight. Let me see this. This comes straight from the United Nation group of expert report S/2012/843, because I don't want y'all to say that I'm making this up. And that gives essentially a rundown of who Colonel Sultan Makenga is. Right now is being called general. Not sure where he got his formation, but ethnic Tutsi, born in Nyanzale Rutshuru territory, December 25th, 1973, grew up in Pati, Masisi territory. Military career, 1992, just like Laurent Kunda, he joined the RPA, fought alongside Paul Kagame. Just like Laurent Kunda. Then in 1996, he joined the AFDL, backed by Rwanda, founded by Rwanda. When they fell through with Laurent Désiré Kabila, he was arrested by the Republican guards. In 1999, he joined the RCD, an armed group backed by Rwanda, and has as a captain and was subsequently promoted to major. Not sure what type of training that he got, but he was a major in 1999. But he was part of an armed groups backed and funded by Rwanda. 2003, that's the Sun City Accord. After it was signed in 2002 in Sun City, South Africa city. Then they talked about a government, a unified government, right? Where again, this idea of brassage and mixage was brought to the table. And in 2003, Makenga officially joined the newly created FRDC. 3 years later, Makenga refused brassage and redeployment outside of the Kivu. They were trying to cut his roots to Rwanda because the Congolese government at that time, led by Joseph Kabila, the son of Laurent Désiré Kabila, who was, by the way, assassinated. His assassination made it made it easier for peace talk to happen because he did not, President Kabila, the father, did not want to negotiate or talk to Rwanda or Paul Kagame because probably he knew, right? But as soon as he got assassinated, that was right after the aftermath of the Lusaka Accord in 1999, after the Pretoria Accord, I believe. And then in 2001, he was assassinated. His son took over. So his son, Joseph Kabila, tried to redeploy Makenga outside of the Kivu. Makenga refused. So then in 2007, because apparently he was above the law, Makenga took part of a mixage. It seems like it means like mixage is a French term that says mixed together, essentially. Process and became Bravo Brigade commander. He was promoted after refusing a direct order by the commander-in-chief, the president of the Congo, to be redeployed outside of the Kivu. He was promoted Bravo Brigade commander. 2007, 2008, he deserted the FRDC and joined the CNDP, another armed groups controlled, funded, supported by Paul Kagame of Rwanda, as Rutshuru commander and Bosco Tanganda as deputy in charge of operation. So Bosco Tanganda, I'm also going to talk about him. He was also part of this myriad of people that they were told to include in the Congolese army, yet they only had allegiance to Paul Kagame because from the beginning they were fighting alongside Paul Kagame within the RPA. So 2009, Makenga joined the FRDC, and on February 17, 2009, was named Deputy Commander in charge of Intelligence and Operation for Kimia 2 operation in South Kivu. 2010, Makenga's ranks of full colonel was officially recognized on December 31st, 2010, and his command position was retained from Amani Leo operation in South Kivu. May 2012, and that's when this report was written and published, after refusing, very important, let's zoom this, after refusing to take part in Amani Kamilifu operations against the FDLR in South Kivu, Makenga stopped attending FRDC meetings in January and later deserted the FRDC on May 4th. From Rwanda, he was named the military commander of M23 base at Runyoni, North Kivu on May 6th. He was named in Rwanda commander of M23. This is the same Makenga today that is leading the military branch of M23. The same dude. The same guy. Another person that I'm going to mention is Bosco Tanganda, the co-founder, one of the co-founders of the M23, right? It's actually fascinating when you read stories about him. Oh, I forgot to mention that. The same report, I believe, let me just show y'all. The same report, Annex 22, says M23 chain of commands in Kigali shared with the group by Western diplomats. And then again, it's the same reports /2012/843. It shows General James Kabarebe, Kigali, in 2012, guys. Mr. Francois Wukogoza, political coordinator and executive secretary. We have Colonel Sultani Makenga, military coordinator and acting chief of general staff. Today is being called general. And then you have the political structure, administration and finance, M23 PNC commander, Colonel Ibrahim. And then you have, for the political branch, Baudouin Garouye, Padiri, Major Bosco, reserved for Makenga, Colonel Jimmy, Colonel Serafami. So you have the names of the people, including Sultani Makenga, under the command of General James Kabarebe. Very important. So back to Bosco Tanganda, that we are asking Congolese people, right, to integrate in the army, right? Bosco Tanganda, and I've written a lot about these people. Give me a second. Oh, I was typing it and then it just, it's very important to know that, because when you don't know history, you would think that, oh, this is a beautiful paper, right? That the Congress government signed, and therefore peace shall come back. Congolese people shall live in peace, shall be living in peace in their homes. No, we're in 2025, but these things have been coming back over and over again. I am looking for this. So Bosco Tanganda, he was born in Rwanda, where he grew up. And then in 1973, same year as Sultani Makenga, and then fled to the DR Congo as a teenager after attacks on fellow ethnic Tutsis. At the age of 17, Bosco Tanganda began his fighting days at 17, alternating between being a rebel and a soldier in both Rwanda and the DR Congo. Excuse me. At 17, he's a minor officially, right? But he was fighting in Rwanda alongside Paul Kagame. That's a war crime, right? Isn't it? When you enroll children, minors in the army, he did that, fighting for the Rwandan government, or Paul Kagame, I would say, right? At the age of 17. In 2002, militia leader in Congolese region of Ituri. 2006, indicted by the ICC International Criminal Court for allegedly recruiting child soldiers in Ituri. In charge of troops who carried out 2008 Kiwanji massacre of 150 people. 2009, integrated into Congolese National Army. Right there, pause. 2009. A lot of things happened before that. One thing to point out, the guy that was integrated in the Congolese army, just like we've seen in 2005, that we're asking Congolese government to do, and Congolese people, victims of these type of criminals, to integrate them while they have massacred people, participate in the enrollment of children in the army, which is illegal international law, which is a war crime, raping women, right? And fighting on behalf of a different country. So I'm going to pause there to show you how the Congo, since for years, the Congolese people have been presented the same formula. I even asked this question because there was a conversation on X, and I asked this question. Bosco Tangana, co-founder of M23, was born in Rwanda and fought alongside Paul Kagame from the age of 17. When an international arrest warrant was issued against him, the ICC considered him to be Rwandan nationality. So I wonder when and how exactly he became Congolese. This is a legitimate question. And honestly, like, I'm not denying his citizenship, but I'm just saying, right, that how did he become Congolese? He was born in Rwanda. He fought alongside Paul Kagame. And then from the age of 17, he was when did he actually become Congolese? I want to be able to know. If somebody asks me, when were you able to be Congolese? I will show you my birth certificate. I'll show you my documents. I'll show you the school that I went to. I will show you my journey to prove you my citizenship. And I'm not here asking necessarily for proof for Bosco Tangana, but I'm pointing out the incoherence when we talk about a region where the Congolese government has not been able to have control of for over 30 years, that somebody who has a records of being disloyal to the country, to the land, to the people, that person was presented as a Congolese person. But we're going to continue to read. That's BBC, by the way. And I know people don't like BBC because supposedly they're biased, which they are. I can show you the ICC, same documents, same thing, or the United Nations, right? Same thing, same story. 2012, defects from the army sparking a new rebellion which forces 800,000 from their homes. That's the birth of the M23. 2013, surrenders to the US Embassy in Kigali, Rwanda. Y'all, I don't know if y'all actually understand that. He's in Congo. Supposedly he was Congolese citizen because he was one of the general of the army in 2009. Joseph Kabila made him general. But and that was in 2009, 3 years after he was indicted by the ICC for committing war crimes, right? And crimes against humanity. 3 years later, he's promoted, just like Sultani Makenga, general of the army, because we had to reintegrate them. We had to mix them in the Congolese army. And in 2012, after pressure from you guys, pressure from the public in the US, in Europe, there was actually a movie that I really encourage y'all to go and watch. It's called Congo Crisis, Uncovering the Truth. That's a movie that was made in 2013. That was the first time that I encountered personally or knew about Friends of the Congo when I was supposed to present at Portland Community College on a situation that was any topic that I had dear to my heart. So I chose the Congo. And during my research, I found that video that I encourage everyone to go and watch. It's only 25 minutes from 2013. It's 2013. It is different actors, but still relevant in terms of what's being done, how things operate. Is this movie Crisis in the Congo 14 years ago and still relevant, uncovering the truth. Go and watch that movie, that short documentary. So he, who is a Congolese citizen, right? So it's what people will say. But when the US finally decided to withdraw its support to Rwanda, when the international community within the World Bank and the IMF and other countries, Germany and France, decided to sanction Rwanda, right? When they decided to sanction Rwanda, Rwanda automatically ceased its support to M23. And together with the Congolese army and the United Nations peacekeeping force, they were able to military defeat the M23. But the guy who was the co-founder of the M23 somehow was able to drive from the Kivu where he was to Kigali, Rwanda. So how did he get into Rwanda? If he's Congolese, did he have a laissez-passer? Did he have a special privilege? Or did he come back with a Rwandan passport? I think these are really legitimate questions that we should be asking, right? Because even if he was supported, but how do you get in the country without passport, without documentation? So that's why I'm saying that when and how did he become Congolese? Because James Kabarebe, like I mentioned earlier, he was a Congolese chief of staff. So this dude, co-founder of the M23, still drive to Kigali and is able to get in the US embassy and seek for asylum. And the US, the United States government, who has never ratified a treaty with the ICC, so they had absolutely no obligation with the ICC, as we see right now, right? With Netanyahu and Israel and Gaza, and how they are sanctioning everyone from the ICC. They're sanctioning it's ridiculous what we see. But back then, absolutely zero obligation to the ICC. They still handed over Bosco Tanganda to the ICC. So Bosco Tanganda right now has been found guilty, right? That's him. Beautiful picture. 13 counts of war crimes, 5 counts of crimes against humanity allegedly committed in 2002 and 2003 in the Ituri district, He was declared guilty on July 8th, 2009. That's Bosco Tangana right there. Same guy, right? So, am I missing anyone? I think these three: James Kabarebe, Laurent Kunda, Bosco Tanganda, Sultani Makenga, 4 people. That to me, I thought it's very important for me to mention those 4 people to show you how ridiculous this is. Also, given the fact that when it comes to the FDLR, they are not required. The Rwanda government is not required or asked to integrate them in the security forces, but they're doing it, but not with the same intention. They are doing it and saying that, you know what, we're gonna recruit you and we're gonna put you in a separate unit that only operates in the Congo, right? But to Congolese people, to the Congolese government, any potential reintegration of commander into armed force, FRDC and the Congolese National Police shall be carried out in a rigorous, individualized, and conditional manner on a case-by-case basis based on clear. This doesn't make sense. The incoherence on a case-by-case basis based on clear criteria, including moral and physical fitness, in particular respect for and absence for serious violation of international humanitarian law and loyalty to the state and its institution. We talk about the same M23 accused by Human Rights Watch, accused by the United Nations, accused by Amnesty International, accused by even the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. government, accused by the European of war crimes and crimes against humanity, at the point that people or members of M23 have been not just arrested, like I mentioned about Bosco Tanganda at the ICC for war crimes, not just sanctioned. James Kabarebe was sanctioned by the US last year, or was that early this year? Lost track of time. Other members of M23, including Kone Nanga and Sutani Makenga and all of them, sanctioned. And people will be like, yeah, but sanction doesn't mean anything because Mandela was also under the US terrorist list, doesn't mean anything. Yeah, okay, you got a fair point. But what about the parts where I'm saying that it has been documented by not just one organization, but any serious organization that exists on Earth that is looking, monitoring about the situation in the Congo, all of them have said that these people that Rwanda, or these armed groups that Rwanda keeps funding, commit war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And you don't believe about the genocide part? Go read the DRC Mapping Human Rights Violation 1993 to 2003. It talks about the AFDL, backed by Rwanda, accused of committing war crimes. It talks about the RCD, backed by Rwanda, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide. They didn't have at that time the M23, but I talked about the actors are the same, right? It also talks about FDLR. I'm not gonna lie. It also talks about the Congolese security forces also committing war crimes. Might not to the extent, right? To those forces that have been with impunity committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, where you have after the 1994 genocide, you had a counter genocide that happened in the Congo of Hutus, refugees in the Congo on Congolese soil. You don't have to listen to what I'm saying and believe what I'm saying. Just go and watch and read Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctor Without Borders report The hunting and killing of Rwandan refugees in Zaire, Congo, 1996 to 1997. It maps out, it documents not just the crime, but also where they took places in refugee camps, the same camps that today M23 is killing. The people are actually being slaughtered and forcibly being removed, right? So this, guys, is too much because it is a reason why this cycle of violence continues. Because you're not going to tell me that somebody who is actively fighting within the M23 is not committing war crimes. I don't know. If they haven't, how can you prove it, right? How can you prove that this person has never been involved in actually killing or raping and plundering the country? How can you prove it as an evidence? How can you present it as an evidence? That's why sometimes you're just guilty by association. You voluntarily join a terrorist groups or groups accused by multiple credible institution organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the US government, European Unions. Am I missing anyone? The United Nations, of committing war crimes, crimes of humanity, and crimes of genocide. So 3, joint security. I'm going to do this in 2 parts or 3 because I think it's important for people to read this before we even dive into the economic component. And if so, even release and just record things and just, publish them for people to actually be able to see that the Congo has been indeed coned. Joint security coordination mechanism. The parties shall work together and with regional and international partners to promote stability, security, and development in the region, recognizing that peace and prosperity are interdependent. They have been doing that for years, by the way. I just gave a really long history. There's even the Accord d'Addis Abeba in 2013, right after the M23 was defeated, that talks about working together to promote stability. And I actually want to say that that accord is perhaps more comprehensive than, or more effective, at least on paper, than the one that was signed in Washington. Because this specific accord signed in 2013, it was signed by the president of, not, well, the president he didn't sign, but he was represented. So you have the president of the Congo, Joseph Kabila, was there. The then vice president of Angola, that signed on behalf of the president of Angola at that time. The president of the Congo Brazzaville, the other Congo. Yes, there are 2 Congos in case you didn't know. Welcome to Congo Unfiltered. The other Congo, Denis Sassou Nguesso, president, was there, signed. The second deputy prime minister of Central African Republic signed on behalf of the president of Central African Republic at that time, Francois Bozizé. And then you had the Minister of External Relations and International Cooperation of the Republic of Burundi, another country. And he signed on behalf of the president of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, at that time. You had Rwanda, the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. You had Salva Kiir of South Sudan. You had South Africa represented. You had Uganda represented. You had Tanzania represented. You had Zambia. Am I missing someone? You had the United Nations represented with his Secretary General. You had the chairperson of SADC, South African Development Community. You had the chairperson that time of the African Union. And you had the chairperson of the International Conference on the Great Lake region. Everybody was there, a full house. They all signed. They all signed a few commitments for the Congo. I'm not going to go over that, but you should go. There was a commitment for the region not to interfere in internal affairs of neighborhood countries, which Rwanda has been really doing that. Paul Kagame, a few days ago, he just talks about Congolese politics again. To neither to tolerate nor provide assistance to support of any kind of armed groups, obviously, Paul Kagame has violated that. To respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of neighborhood countries, Paul Kagame has violated just that. And also to strengthen regional cooperation, including deepening economic integration with special consideration for the exploitation of natural resources. So, what this is talking about is not new, right? The parties already established and agreed to launch within 30 days of this agreement, entry into force a joint DRC Rwanda security coordination mechanism that shall operate solely in accordance with terms decided between the parties. The joint security mechanism shall establish shared operating procedures and reporting the mechanism to ensure transparency in the scale of scope of operation. The joint security the comment section has been really quiet, but I'm going to continue. The joint security coordination mechanism shall be governed by the following principle and the implementation plan set out in the annex. An irreversible and verifiable end to state support. I think I went there. I went over that, right? So I'm not gonna repeat that. We went over the CONUPs. Point 4, refugees, internally displaced persons, and humanitarian consideration. The party shall, with the support of UN agency, relevant humanitarian organizations, and the international community, the return of refugees, facilitate a safe, voluntary, and dignified. UNHCR has been forcibly removing Congolese people to Rwanda, by the way. It's not me saying that, it's the Human Rights Watch. In coordination with territorial and customary authorities of the respective states. Sometimes I think that those who drafted this and those who signed these live in a completely different world. Amnesty International report was published early June. Human Rights Watch report was published June 18th. The accord was signed on the 27th. Like, you guys do not have access to really the information really that I was able to Google in front of the 300 folks right now following. And thank y'all for tuning in and just watching us. Friends of the Congo Unfiltered. Internally displaced person recognize that an end to the conflict is necessary to enable the return of internally displaced persons to the place of origin in coordination with territorial and customary authorities of the Congolese state. That hasn't been happening. Humanitarian assistance create enabling conditions for the delivery of emergency relief and guarantee free, safe, unimpeded, and unconditional access to by humanitarian agency to vulnerable population consistent with their obligation under international humanitarian law and with relevant UN Security Council resolutions. The local authorities of the DRC shall be responsible for doing so under the supervision of the DRC central government. Water break. So, nothing to say about this. I think I've commented a lot on the humanitarian aspect and how this, again, is in total contradiction with the reality and the fact. Point 5, MONUSCO and other multilateral support. The parties shall support and promote the efforts of multilateral peacekeeping, interpositional, and verification forces and mechanisms. The party shall facilitate and support MONUSCO capacity to protect civilians, population, and implements all elements in its mandate, including by respecting MONUSCO's freedom of movement and taking all appropriate measures to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel deployed in Eastern DRC. Mind you, that when they wrote that, signed by the elites of Rwanda, signed by the elites of Congo, the M23 was accused of targeting UN personnel and even killing UN personnel. Twirwaneho, which is an armed groups, non-state armed groups backed by Rwanda, right? And also that was able to join the M23, mostly present in the Kivu, South, killed UN MONUSCO, which, by the way, is a war crime. You do not, under international law, attack. You cannot, you shall not attack UN personnel, armed or non-armed. Though are UN personnel, you should not attack them, period. But they have, because it seems to be, by what I'm seeing overseas in the Middle East, it seems to be common practice now. You can target UN personnel that are targeting journalists anyways. The parties commit to advance the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2773 and other relevant UNSC resolution. And this resolution actually called for the immediate withdrawal of Rwandan troops without any preconditions. That's what this says. But as we read prior to point 5, that there is a condition for the Rwanda to lift its defensive measures. So again, this is in total contradiction to what the UN resolution is saying. This peace deal is in total contradiction with itself, and it's also with the UN resolution 2773. The parties recognize MONUSCO as mandated by UNSC resolution 2765 plays an important role in local peace and security. Not sure what this is. Maybe somebody in the comments can tell me. Want to move on. The point 6, which is the regional economic integration framework. I talked about the Accord Cadre Addis Abeba, which is called the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the DRC and the region, where you had over almost like 10 countries involved, or if not 8, right? Congo and all of his 9 neighbors involved, literally. The parties agreed to launch within 3 months. This is important. Of this agreement entry into force, the phased regional economic integration framework to be set out in a separate agreement to be titled the Regional Economic Integration Framework. I'm going to pause there, guys. First of all, for a peace agreement, can someone tell me why do we need a section or a chapter on the economy integration when we are talking about peace? It is peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Republic of Rwanda. So far, I haven't read anything about peace yet. I have not read anything about peace yet. This tells us with precision when we can expect the agreements entry into force for the economic framework. 3 months. We know exactly when we will be talking about economy. We will talk about money. 3 months. It doesn't give a time frame like I was reading to you guys about the CONOPS, neutralize the FDLR, and most importantly, the withdrawal of Rwandan troops. So vague. As a matter of fact, that it's not mentioned anywhere. But we know, and that's the issue about not being willing to humanize this conflict and to acknowledge that the people who have died, 6 million people, from the latest vigorous report written by International Rescue Committee in 2007. That's the last time that somebody, an organization, sat down and decided to actually do a study on the consequences of the war, the victim, who and how many people, probably not who in details, but how many people were killed in this war that seemed to be, and it's been factual, empirically documented that Rwanda is fueling that war, that the Congolese elite is also somehow benefiting from that war. 6 million people, most of them children, women. We don't know when those victims, those people today are going to know peace. Congolese people are told that the Congolese government signed with the government of Rwanda a peace deal, but they're not told when they can go home. They're not told when the bullet will stop, when the Rwandan troops will go home, when the rape will stop, when the plundering will stop. They're not told any of that. No timeline, no specific timeline, but we know within 3 months that the parties agreed to launch within 3 months of this agreement entry into force the phased regional economic integration framework. Because it seems like we are okay, the world, the international community is okay with commodifying the war. That we okay that black bodies in the heart of Africa are commodities, that they are disposable. 6 million people can be slaughtered in the heart of Africa. 7,000 to 11,000 Congolese just for the cities right now under Rwandan occupation killed. We are okay with that because the priority for us is the regional integration framework. We can be incoherent in this peace deal. We can be incoherent to allow those who are profiting from the war, those who are actually doing the killing, to use this as a loophole. Like Rwanda can wait 8 months, 6 years, a year, 10 years, whatever time it will take to neutralize the FDLR, because it recycled the FDLR, send them back into Congo as part of armed groups, and also because the DRC is not being allowed to have the mean to neutralize forces. Why? Because one, they are asked to integrate those who never had the intention to be loyal to the government, never had the intention to be loyal to the Congo. And then two, maybe the most obvious reason, because they just don't right now have control of those territories that presumably the FDLR right now reside. They are right now under the Rwandan occupation. So from the get-go, the Congolese government is literally set to fail. But do you think that when a separate agreement on the regional economic will be signed, that these will be conditioned by peace? The answer is clearly no. This is not conditioned by anything. The peace is conditioned with the neutralization of the FDLR, the lifting of, sarcastically and in the most evil way, the term lifting defensive measures by Rwanda is conditioned with the neutralization of the FDLR. But this, there is absolutely no condition to this. Regional economic integration that builds on existing efforts such as, not going to read all this, but these are acronyms. The party shall use this framework to expand foreign trade and investment derived from regional critical mineral supply chains and introduce greater transparency, which shall ensure illicit economic pathways are blocked and both parties derive greater prosperity, especially for the region's population, from the region's natural resources through mutual beneficial partnerships and investment opportunities. This is false. $24 trillion. That's how much is worth the Congolese soil right now. And Congolese people still live with less than $2 a day, one of the poorest population in the world. Again, it is a peace accord, a peace agreement. Somehow they thought that they should include economic. Bilateral integration. Under the framework, the party shall launch, expand. Under the framework, the party shall launch, ends, or expand the cooperation on shared priorities such as national park management, hydropower development, de-risking of mineral supply chains, joint management of resources in Lake Kivu, and transparent, formalized end-to-end mineral value chains from mine to processed metals that link both countries in partnership and appropriate with the US government and US investors. Again, I ask this question. Why does the Congolese government has to share priorities such as national park management? Why does the Congolese government, the country that has been invaded and that is currently occupied, whose population is being forcibly removed from their homes, whose population is being currently killed, why does the Congolese government has to co-manage? The Congolese National Park talks about the Virunga Park. Why does it needs to be included in this peace deal? Why are we even talking about mineral resources? I get it that the Congo is rich, but please, like, help me understand, why does this need to be included? And in partnership with the US government and US investors. I was trying to think about how to possibly explain this in my future kids. When I will tell them that I was covering live this the signing of the peace deal between the Congo and Rwanda by the US, how can I possibly explain that to my kids who have absolutely no knowledge, because they're kids, of politics? How can I explain that to people who don't care about politics at all? They just want, oh, what's going on in Congo? So I'm gonna break it down in a simple way. You sleeping in your house. Someone breaks in your house and started killing your children, raping your kids, and beating you up. Every night that person comes in and does the exact same thing, and in the morning that person leaves with one of your belongings, I would say. Every day for 30 years. Then you decided, which by the way was not the first time, you have tried many people. This time you decide to you've gone to the police, you've gone to the judge. I'm just gonna use for intended purposes, I'm gonna use police. You decide to go to the police, right? To report that person in. So you go to the police station to report what has been happening to you for the past 30 years. And the police says, okay, we're gonna bring that person because you came to the police so that the police who is powerful can stop that person from entering your home illegally, killing your family members, and stealing from you. You want the police to stop them. You want justice. And the police decides to bring you a contract. In that contract, it says that the person that has been breaking into your house, I'm not sure why I even have to say that, but because it's kind of like redundant, breaking into your house illegally, right? killing your people, your family, stealing from you, the same person it's mentioned in that contract that for him to stop killing you, for him to stop stealing from you, for him to stop coming into your house, for him to stop what the police frame as defensive measures, that a gang that has been causing chaos in their own house in a different neighborhood than you, not even like literally, you have nothing to do with that. But for them to stop being in your space, in your personal property, that group needs to be neutralized first. That group needs to be 100% neutralized. But why does that person needs to be in your house in the first place to do that? That's what they frame as defensive measures. And on top of that, that the cherry on top, that police is telling you that you're going to have to manage your garden with that police officer, with that person that has been literally killing your people and stealing from you. You got that person along with you together with that person that you are literally reporting to the police, that you guys are going to co-manage your own house that you bought, that you fought for, that you earned, that was God given to you. Then now that land, that house that was given to you by right, you have to co-manage it. That the TV that you're watching every day, you might gonna have to watch TV in your living room with them. That the food that you have in your fridge, you guys need to co-manage that. You need to give your food, your food that you bought from the stuff that you got from your garden, right? The vegetables that you got from your garden, you need to share that food with the invaders. That's exactly what's going on. That's what I'm going to be telling my kids. And I hope that in few years we'll be teaching that to kids, and that those who signed these were not just Americans, were not just Rwandan, they were Congolese as well. The Congolese elite, part of the bourgeoisie, la classe des bourgeois, those who have money and don't care about who's on top. Regional integration. Additionally, the key partners, the party commit to explore options to link the framework to other international or regional economic development initiatives, including infrastructure projects. Economic oversight. Party shall establish and utilize independent economic audit and anti-corruption mechanism to monitor mineral supply chains, infrastructure projects, and any future economic agreement between, the parties as set out in the regional economic integration. Again, I asked the question, why do we need to include this in the peace accord? Somebody who has an answer, please let me know. Someone says it's neo-colonialism. Absolutely. Absolutely. Seven, implementation and dispute resolution. Any disputes arising from the implementation of this agreement shall be resolved amicably between the parties with the facilitation of the Joint Oversight Committee upon request of either party. Where the parties fail to resolve a dispute, the party shall refer the matter to Joint Oversight Committee. The Joint Oversight Committee, for the effective implementation of this agreement, the party hereby establish a Joint Oversight Committee subject to the following terms. Should I read this? The parties shall be members of the JOC, not sure what this is. I think it's the Joint Oversight Committee, and shall invite within 3 days the following government and intergovernmental organization to serve on the JOC: African Union, Facilitator Qatar, United States. The Joint Oversight Committee shall have as its mandate the following: to receive complaints from the parties about violation, to take measures as appropriate to address violation, monitor and examine claim of violation, and solve and resolve disputes. The committee may appoint another representative or establish an appropriate ad hoc mechanism to assist in the resolution of any disputes related to these agreements. The committee shall endeavor to make decisions and resolve disputes by consensus. The JOC shall endeavor to establish its terms of reference at the first meeting. First meeting of the JOC shall be as soon as practicable, but not later than 45 days from entry into force. The party shall explore hosting the first meeting of the committee in Washington, D.C. This agreement does not create obligation or any non-party state serving on the Joint Oversight Committee. Final provisions. 8. This agreement shall remain in force indefinitely. Indefinitely, that's what the Congolese government just signed, unless otherwise agreed by the parties. This agreement may be terminated at any time by either party upon 6 months written notice to either party. This agreement may be amended by written agreement to the parties so they can change it, right? The annex shall be considered part of this agreement. So the annex that I read to you at the beginning with CONOPS is actually part of this agreement. This agreement shall enter into force on the obligation take effect starting from the signature of this agreement that was signed on June 27, 2025, in duplicates in the English and French language. Signed by the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, signed by Rwanda, witnessed by the United States government. And this is how you essentially sell your country. So I many questions to ask, right? And I really want us to be hopeful. I want the Congolese people particularly to be hopeful that, because I did wrote a we did write a post that we shared on Instagram asking if people thought that this agreement between the DRC and Rwanda would bring about peace. I was honestly surprised, but at the same time, not really. I was surprised to see that the majority of people said yes, they did believe that this will bring peace. And I want people to never lose hope, right? That's why I thought it was very important for me to do this today on Congo Unfiltered, to go line by line about this peace agreement. If this will really bring peace in the Congo. The day after this was signed, clash erupted between the Congolese government and M23. Couple weeks, or if not on 4th of July, actually, the President Kagame commented, and his comments was quite inflammatory regarding the Congolese politics, regarding the situation. After this was signed, the Congo is still under occupation. The people of Congo right now are living under surveillance by the Rwandan government, camera being installed on the streets. The M23 literally recruiting people by force, mostly men. That's the report that we get from folks on the ground. This is after this agreement was signed. So I don't want people to lose hope, but I also think that it's very important for folks to still have critical thinking when talking about the war in the Congo. Being able to pinpoint actors and ask themselves from the movie that hopefully you guys will watch, a documentary from 2013, why still the same actors? Why still the same modus operandis, the same way of operating, that somehow you have almighty United States of America, greatest country on earth, where you have that literally is the headquarter of the United Nations, find itself shielding a country like Rwanda from any sort of accountabilities. A country that says that all men are created equal. A country that strives to uphold itself as a model, right? That holds a Security Council seat with the veto power, have a hard time providing justice in the Congo, have a hard time imposing justice in the Congo by his being complacent or being okay with commodifying this. Like I really find it really hard to understand why this so easy conflict to understand, why it's so complicating to solve. That if it's the minerals that you want, is there a way to obtain that without killing people? Is there a way to obtain that without allowing civilians to be killed, raped? Can we do that the right way? Is it possible? In that documentary, Congo Uncovering the Truth, it says that Congolese, there was someone, an activist, I forgot his name, but he says in that documentary, he says Congolese people do not eat coltan. Congolese people do not eat gold. You want those minerals? We will gladly allow you to have them. Don't kill people for that. Another thing that I wanted to mention, it was this resolution that is being introduced, apparently agreed to in the House. Not sure what that means. Not sure about the status of it. I will double check, but it's Resolution 559. It was introduced by Representative Smith Christopher from New Jersey. And then recognizing the urgent needs for peace, stability, and reconciliation in the DRC, and supporting the diplomatic, economic, and humanitarian efforts to achieve lasting peace in the region. Whereas the DRC has endured decades of conflict, political instability, humanitarian crisis causing immense suffering for its people, whereas Eastern DRC and the broader African Great Lake region continue to experience cycle of violence, displacement, and human rights violation that threatens regional stability, whereas since the resurgence of the M23 rebel groups in 2021, that were about 6.8 million internally displaced persons by April 2025, according to the United Nations Office for Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, whereas more than 1 million people were displaced in the first half of 2025 alone. Whereas one in every 4 Congolese people face severe food insecurity, and more than 2.1 million children under the age of 5 suffer from acute malnutrition, according to OSHA. Whereas according to OSHA, as of 2025, nearly 25 million people in the DRC require humanitarian assistance, making it one of the largest and most complex humanitarian crises globally. Whereas the European Union Parliament adopted a resolution on November 24, 2022, addressing forced displacement and escalating violence in Eastern DRC, calling for targeted humanitarian aid and termination of support to armed groups. Whereas the EU has enacted regulation to establish supply chain obligations for importers of conflict minerals and to reaffirm its support for regional peace efforts through diplomatic and funding initiatives, whereas local and national efforts, including the Pacte social pour la paix et le bien vivre. I think they meant bien-être vivre ensemble, social pact for peace and living together, a joint effort by the National Episcopal Conference of Congo, the Catholic Church, SENCO, and the Church of Christ in Congo, ECC, aim to promote reconciliation, civic engagement, and lasting peace in the region, whereas civil society organizations, religious leaders, and local communities actively support citizens' workshops and national forums to form peace agreements, whereas regional diplomacy, including the Dual Rwanda and Nairobi process, provides critical platform for mediation and disarmament of rebel groups, whereas African-led peace initiatives such as the Rwanda and Nairobi process, facilitated by the East African Community and South African Development Community, provides essential framework for mediation, disarmaments, and dialogue to resolve the conflict and promotes regional cooperation. Whereas, according to the African Union, coordinated peace frameworks such as the Rwanda and Nairobi process remain critical tools in addressing transnational and armed groups and enabling regional dialogue. Whereas the United States has provided vital diplomatic humanitarian support, illegal exploitation and trade national, particularly through the mining sector, finance armed groups, and empower corruption, violence, and child and forced labor within the region. Whereas the DRC possesses immense natural and mineral wealth estimated in the trillion of dollars, including approximately 70% of the world's cobalt reserve and 40% of global coltan production, whereas militias exploit these resources from some of which is mined by children as young as 4 years old, to finance the operation, perpetuating conflicts and environments degradation, whereas the century has documented persistent shortcomings in supply chain transparency and accountability, particularly in Chinese owned operations that fail to comply with labor and environmental standards. Whereas the M23, the Democratic Force for the Liberation of Rwanda, and FDLR, and the Allied Democratic Force, ADF, among other groups across Eastern DRC, commit atrocities including mass murder, rape, torture, beheadings, burning, kidnappings, and forced conscription of children. Whereas M23 and FDLR, ADF, and other armed groups across Eastern DRC deliberately destroy and loot towns, churches, and religious schools to erase non-conforming cultural and religious communities. Whereas these crimes have caused the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people, rendering them vulnerable to exploitation and death. Whereas crimes against humanity, as defined in the Nuremberg Charter, subsequent international instruments, including the Convention on Prevention of Punishment of Crime of Genocide, including such atrocities, especially when committed on political, ethnic, and religious grounds. Whereas the United States has designated the ADF as a foreign terrorist organization and its leader, Seka Mukabluku, as a specially designated global terrorist. And whereas the ADF operates as an ISIS affiliate, now therefore be it resolved that the House of Representatives, one, important, recognize the urgent need for peace, stability, and reconciliation in the DRC in support of diplomatic, economic, and humanitarian effort to achieve lasting peace in the region. Recognize the benefits of an inclusive national dialogue led and facilitated by the Catholic Church and Protestant Church that include all factors of civil society movement, religious confessions, political parties, and armed groups. So that's funny. To promote social cohesion, national security, and principle of good governance. Urges the peaceful resolution of tension between the DRC and Rwanda and encourages all regional stakeholders to participate in African-led dialogues such as Luanda and Nairobi processes, calling for a stop to all state support for non-state armed groups and respect for the DRC constitution, democratic principles, human rights, and the cessation of arbitrary prosecution, detention, and denial of official documents such as passports to political opponents and citizens, calls on the DRC government to combat systemic corruption and implements transparent, accountable governance and enforcement adherence to term limits containing the DRC constitution. Endorse 6, the establishment of critical minerals commercial agreements between the US and the DRC to promote mutual economic and national security interests, as well as the responsible management of strategic mineral resources. 7, encourage, strengthen local and international implementation of supply chain traceability and due diligence, regulation targeting conflict minerals, and support reforms in the mining sector to combat corruption and illicit financing. 8, urges the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, to take measures to sanction corrupt actors, armed groups, including the M23, the ADF, for atrocities, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. I wish that had said Tshisekedi or Paul Kagame. 9, encourages the use of targeted economic sanctions and visa restriction against individuals and entities that are corrupt, obstructing peace, perpetuating violence, and committing human rights abuses. And 10, reaffirms the commitment of the United States to support peace, democracy, and economic development in the DRC and the African Great Lake region. That was introduced by Representative Christopher Smith, on June 27th, the day the peace deal was signed, right? Doesn't say I'm not sure if that has been voted yet, but it says agreed agreed to in house, but I'm not sure what that means. So this resolution, which is really comprehensive, right? It points out a lot of things. One, that the United States obviously is one of the stakeholders because of the $24 trillion in terms of minerals that the Congo has. That Rwanda is also one of the protagonists here, just like the Congo being invaded. And then also armed groups supported by state actors, ADF, that some say that are backed by Uganda. I think we've been talking a lot about Rwanda, that sometimes we forget about Uganda too, right? That when Uganda a couple years ago reached out to the Congolese government and decided to enter in the Congo to track the ADF because of a terrorist attack that happened in Uganda, The UN group of experts wanted to see evidence. Let us in Uganda. Let us see the evidence that you guys have, because we want to make sure that indeed it is the ADF that did that terrorist attack. The Ugandan government refused. Why would you refuse if you have nothing to hide? Sovereignty, maybe. But if there are speculation, people saying that somehow you are just like the Rwandan government has been doing for years, you are somehow fueling the ADF, supporting the ADF to justify you entering in the Congo. Why don't you just let the international community with the facts, analyze the facts, and establish that you have nothing to do with the ADF? Because the Ugandan government today is in Congo, fighting specifically the ADF. And you have the son of the president of Uganda praising the M23. He was threatening sometimes South African troops and Congolese troops. Though he was met a few weeks ago by President Tshisekedi. I don't know. Don't ask me why or how. I cannot, even sometimes when I say facts about the Congo, my brain goes crazy because there are certain things that don't make sense or don't add up. Yes, Ugandan government, who from the get-go were saying that they will never fight the M23, that the M23 are the brothers and sisters, that even though they were within the EAC, the East African force that President Tshisekedi naively let in to supposedly take down the M23, and he said they were going to enter Babunagana and take care of them. They never entered Babunagana. And that coalition was such a failure that Tshisekedi had to kick them out. The same run governments or leadership, because the son of Museveni, president of Uganda, is a high-ranking officer in the army, right? So what he says cannot be taken lightly. That they're not going to fight the M23. That the M23 are the brothers and sisters. The same Museveni was welcome red carpets in the Congo recently. The same Ugandan government sentenced to pay $360 million by the International Court of Justice to the Congo for war crimes from the episode that I mentioned in 1998, I believe. Forgot about the time frame. Where Ugandan governments, Rwandan governments fought against each other in the Congo. That's why the Congolese people chose August 2nd to commemorate the genocide for economic gain, because you have folks who are fighting, killing people, Congolese, kicking them out of the land so that they can exploit diamonds, gold, and all the minerals, cobalt, you name them, coltan, right? The ICJ sentenced the Rwandan government to pay $360 million, which was, by the way, negotiated by President Tshisekedi when he came to power. And at the same time, in parallel, President Tshisekedi of Congo negotiates an infrastructure contract with Uganda to construct a road from Kampala to the Congo. And the price tag of that infrastructure was about the same amount of money that the Congolese government was supposed to receive from the Ugandan, $300 million. You don't want to believe me? Look it up. And a few years ago, I hosted a space because I was trying to understand Ugandan life, our politics. So I hosted and invited a few members of the civil society, and I was literally managing a debate regarding the crisis in the Congo, but from a Ugandan perspective, because it's very important to do that exercise. And I found out during that space on X that And that was in 2021, mind you, or 2022. I found out that the company that was hired to build the roads in the Congo, that company allegedly belonged to the president of Uganda. I was like, wow. So they take the money, but somehow we're still gonna manage to spend another $300 million to build the roads from Goma or from Kivu, I'm not sure where exactly, to Uganda, right? We're still gonna manage, besides the history between the Ugandan troops, to have them come back in the Congo and supposedly fight the ADF. And one of the things that I find really fascinating, in one of the UN reports published a couple years ago, not sure if I can find it, but that report was talking about, the ADF and how they were communicating. And the UN group of experts said that the ADF was, because again, we're in the Congo, right? Like it's the forest, guys. Like you don't get connection like I have right now. But they had access to internet. And how did they have access to the internet? Through, oh my God, where is it? They had access to the internet through, let's see. Starlink. That's not me saying that. 2024. Literally, no, December 2024. Use of computers and satellites communications. ADF also used satellites communications to evade possible detection through usage of cell phone data. Witnesses reported the use of Starlink, a satellite-based internet system enabled by a small satellite dish. Eyewitnesses, former hostage and a former combatant, described the equipment as consisting of a small rectangular plate and compact box closely matching the specifications of a Starlink device. Yes, guys, Starlink, Elon Musk Starlink, that is receiving the US federal money. The US government is providing funds to Starlink, and if they want to, they can literally hear. They probably are doing that already, honestly. I mean, it's the US, greatest country on earth, right? They are probably right now listening to every single communication from the ADF so they can decimate the ADF if they want to. Just tap into Starlink, right? If I have this idea, the US government probably already has. The ability of Starlink likely enhanced communication between camp commander and with the network outside the DRC, particularly ISCAP, I'm not sure what that means. Former ADF combatant indicated that Seka Baluku, mentioned by the Representative Smith, it's all connected, guys. Seka Baluku from the ADF mentioned by Representative Smith in that resolution. Muse Pierre and Punisher used such a device, indicating that Medina camp was equipped with at least one such device. One former combatant who knew Mehdi Nkalubo reported that the latter obtained Starlink device approximately 9 months ago. Former hostage and combatant also referred to the commanders in each camp using laptops, solar batteries, walkie-talkies, Motorola's, and cell phones. Wow. This is UN report of literally 2024, December 2024. So you have ISIS affiliated ADF indiscriminately targeting, right? Congolese civilians regardless of their religion. And that a satellite communication service owned by Elon Musk is being used. Who has been receiving US federal government's funding, has been used by a terrorist group to communicate. I don't think people understand how this is big, right? There is no conspiracy here. This is the UN, United Nations Group of Expert report telling us this. So really, if the Congolese government or the US government wanted to shut down ADF or the way they communicate, the US government or Elon Musk himself, they literally have the capability to do that. So I think it's very important to read things like the peace accord, things like the UN Group of Expert report, to be able to understand the crisis and why we are where we are today. I keep saying this, not in a way to disrespect any nation, particularly the US, but I'm saying this as a truth that what's happening in the Congo is a direct consequence of the United States foreign policy. The United States, I don't even want to mention the EU. I could say the EU. Why the United States? Because when the Congo was designed, because it was designed to be plundered, it was designed to be exploited. And then all the nations, the Western nations, there were 14 that would gather at the Berlin Conference. Though it was agreed a certain country will own, certain countries, certain European countries like France, for example, will own territories, most of them in West Africa. When it was agreed that the UK, the United Kingdom, will own some countries, most of them being in South Africa. When it was agreed that even Germany at the time, that was before World War One, that they will own maybe a country in Central Africa, that the Congo Basin, so the Congo, will be a common market, free markets where all of these countries gathered at the Berlin Conference can exploit freely, can move freely, and exploit the minerals or the resources freely. That was agreed by all of them. They had a consensus on that. Not a single country could claim to own the Congo. It will be shared by all parties. That's why the term Congo Free State came to life. And when they had the Congo Free State, they chose the King Leopold II to facilitate that free trade, right? Or that common market. But the very first president that had the courage, if I can say like that, to recognize King Leopold II leadership guess what country was he from? He was from the US. So he was a US president. And his name was Grover Cleveland. Beautiful picture of him. Let me put him out there. So Grover Cleveland, very first president of the Western world to recognize Leopold II as the one that would facilitate the Congo, so that every country, France, Belgium, Spain, the UK, all these big colonial powers, even Russia at that time, right, will exploit the Congo, will plunder its resources, and allow approximately 10 million people at that time to be killed. He wrote a letter to Leopold II praising him and acknowledging his leadership. So, why am I saying that? Because it's very important to understand that if it wasn't from the United States letter, no one would have had the courage to recognize at that time. To recognize at that time King Leopold II, authority on the Congo. And fast forward 1908, when the government of the United States pressured, maybe not the government, I want to say the people of the United States, the free people of the United States, the free people of France, the free people of Belgium, those who knew at that time to stand beside Congolese, to be friends of the Congo, to be promoting or fighting for human rights, because they thought at that time, 1908, that Black people in the heart of Africa are human beings. They did everything so that one man could no longer own an entire Congo, that it needed to be given to a country, because countries that have process, they have ways to hold someone, people accountable, but not to just the king. So they were able to transfer. It wasn't really in terms of like Congolese people being free changed really anything like substantially, but it was still something, right? So the transfer to Congo ceased to be a personal property of a man who was facilitating the plunder and helping or giving like lands for different countries to plunder. They give it to the Kingdom of Belgium, the government of Belgium, or the parliament. In 1908, pressure by the people. And the US was able to change or modify its foreign policy because of that. Then fast forward, we are in 1960, Congolese Independence Day. The Congolese decided that they want to be independent. They didn't just decide it. They didn't just decide. They also fought for it. They organized. They marched. They were able to take blows from the Belgian troops at that time, to take humiliation, racism, and what was considered to be apartheid at the time, where you had one space or one places that Black people, Congolese people, the native couldn't go, the certain restrooms they couldn't use, certain school they couldn't attend, even though they are in their own countries, in their own country. So they fought for it. So in 1960, the Congolese people decided that they want to be free. They had election. They forced the Belgian government to give them independence, and they were able to elect one man. Yeah, you guessed it, Patrice Emery Lumumba. He was elected, but because of politics and how things were really being played at the time, because Congo was really important. We're talking about a time with the Cold War, with the Soviet Union. We're talking about how the Congo was key to build nuclear weapons in places that the US, for the longest time, wanted to keep secrets, not even mentioned on the map. That it's the Soviet Union president at the time, forgot his name, that literally had to report the activities of the US, right? But it was also because these are really documents that are really out there now. It's not a secret. It's no longer a secret. It was a CIA operation, one of the most expensive in the whole world. It was taking place in Africa, not just in Africa, in the Congo. $81 million to today's value. That's how much the CIA spent on the Congo. The US foreign policy was able to change the course of an entire nation. Lumumba was assassinated, cut into pieces. And after that, it was another a US asset that became a dictator for 32 years, Mobutu. So it is again, fast forward, the US that was able to convince people to come together. I already talked about Rwanda invading the Congo in 1996. Previously, I discussed about involvement of countries and those who are supporting. Yes, the US was or has been supporting Rwanda by a lot, over $1 billion since 2004. President Kagame was literally went to school, military school in the US. It was trained in the US, right? So again, it's the US foreign policy that was able to shape the course of the history of Congolese people in the 90s with Mobutu, in the 90s with Paul Kagame, and then force them to sit down, talk, sign peace agreements like we talked, we discussed, reintegrate people in the those who committed war crimes in the army, in the Congolese army. And then when it came to the elections in 2006, in 2011, maybe not in 2006, 2011, the US gave money to the Congo to organize elections. But when it was two elections rigged by President Joseph Kabila, the US didn't really say much about that. The Carter Foundation of late President Carter said that there was irregularities in the election, 2006 election, 2011 elections, same thing, right? 2018 elections, the US government didn't fund the elections because President Kabila refused, but yet it endorsed the results that place somebody who didn't won the election, President Tshisekedi, as the president of the Congo. So it was through backdoor deal that with President Kabila, who was pressured by the US, the people, not just the government, but most importantly, the people, to not run for a third term. As much as the Congolese people who were dying on the ground, I really want us to be clear, right? So We have that. And today, we are where we are because the man who never won the election was unable to govern the country as a responsible leader would have. The country that he took was not occupied, fully under the Congolese authority, on quote unquote. Wasn't perfect, but we were on the right path. And he exacerbated the situation. He made it worse and gave reasons for folks who are Congolese, right? Some folks, because there are Congolese within the M23. I'm not saying it's a Congolese movement. There are Congolese in the M23, just like there were Congolese in AFDL. But saying that it is a Congolese movement, that's a whole different story. And we talked about this we've been talking about this for 2 hours now, over 2 hours now. So he gave reasons for these people to find or to be bribed or to be rallied to be convinced to take weapons, not just about Tshisekedi, and I want to be clear again, but against their own people. Because 7,000 to 11,000 people killed, none of them are from Tshisekedi's family. They are innocent people. 7.1 million people displaced as per the Organization for Migration. Representative Smith talked about 6.8 million people. 1 million people just as of this year. None of them are part of Tshisekedi's family. So they take weapons. The very few Congolese take weapons against their own country, their own people, right? So Tshisekedi, because he was bribed, because he was brought to power and only answered to not those who elected him, so he doesn't answer to the Congolese people. So he always looked for ways to reinforce his power, to reinforce his presidency, to reinforce his wealth. That's why he went to China and negotiated the contracts like he was asked by the US, who, by the way, as I've told you the whole story of the Congo from 1884, who placed somehow Joseph Kabila, because when Laurent Désiré Kabila was assassinated, he was replaced by Joseph Kabila. Joseph Kabila was hosted in 2000 during that period in the White House by George Bush, I believe. And just like in 2019, they endorsed somebody who was never democratically elected. So Joseph Kabila led to Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi led to what we see today, or what has been happening. And before Joseph Kabila, it was Laurent Désiré Kabila. So it is a pattern, but that can be stopped by how the United States sees the people of the Congo, how the United States sees Congolese resources, and how the United States is right now okay, like we read in these agreements, to commodify and focus on the economic portion more than the Congolese lives, more than the 6 million people already killed, more than the 7 to 11,000 people killed this year in those occupied regions alone. So it's up to the US government, yes, but also the people, those you guys watching this right now, to pressure your senators, your government. Because we also talking really, we right now in a really crazy context right now of these talks of on immigration, right? Where there needs to be a discussion and people are having those discussions, but there needs to be laws that somehow controls how many people come in the United States, like every country should be doing. I just read to you what Congolese people are asked about the refugees, about their immigration. I think that the US also has the right. But I think it's unfair when you restrict people. Right now, 12 countries are being restricted from entering in the United States. And there was a discussion of expanding to 36 countries. Right now, it's almost impossible to obtain a visa, in a US visa, as a tourist. Whether it is from Congo or elsewhere, the US embassy in the Congo was closed for 3 months, almost, right? It's hard to actually have an appointment, but I think it's really, I would say, morally wrong, right? To one, yes, it is your duty to make sure that you control who comes in the country. Sorry, I have the gardener outside. Hope y'all it's not disturbing that much, but it is morally wrong, I believe, to one, refuse access to your country to people who are fleeing a country that you are responsible of literally planning into chaos. You are responsible somehow of what's going on, from the leadership of the Congo that you endorsed to the armed militia backed by a country that you financed, that you support as your ally. I think, yes, Congolese elites, those in power, and I talked about that at the beginning when I mentioned the DR Congo deal with FC Barcelona, for example, or how the Congolese government has been incompetent even in signing this deal. But I also think that the United States, because the United States right now is the number one power in the world, right? And especially when it comes to the Congo, like I mentioned, from the beginning, the very first country to recognize the Congo Free State. So absolutely, the United States has a role in the solution of the Congo. And it's not a minor one, it's a major role that the US must play, not in what seems to be a facade of peace. So only that foreign policy, once that foreign policy turn and now start looking at people of the Congo as human, only when the US foreign policy would turn to Africa and look at Africans not as commodities, not as resources, but as human beings, only when the US foreign policy would start doing partnership and actively work so that African countries or African who sit on immense resources do not need aid from the US, but they need to be free from occupation, free from war, and free from corrupt leaders. That when you create a structure in place for that, I guarantee you people will not come here. People will not walk. I took a Uber a few weeks ago, and I entered in the Uber. The person that was my Uber driver was a fellow Congolese person who is now a US citizen, but I was having a conversation about him, And he told me that he literally walked from Mexico to the US for days. And I told him, wasn't it dangerous? He told me it was either risking to still have a life in the US or die where I was in the Congo. So people will never make that crazy journey of risking the lives and walking days into a desert if they are completely living in peace in their own country. Trust me. You don't have to trust me, but also look at what the US has done with other countries, right? What happened with Germany, who was one of the bad people during World War II, right? There was a flux of immigrants from Vietnam during the war in Vietnam. There was a flux, mass movements of people from the Koreas, right, during the Korea War. But what happened? What do we see today? Is that the US was able to invest into those people, into those countries, that those countries now are within, I mean, I don't know, the G20, whatever you want to say. That a citizen of South Korea has nothing to envy to a US citizen. Someone from Japan has literally nothing to dream about the US. Same thing about people from Germany. So I think it's very important for us to understand that the solution that we are trying to come up with are only band-aids. That yes, the US will most likely, like it has always been, like it has always done, benefit from the immense resources because the US has been present. And it's naturally, right? Or rightfully so. But if the United States doesn't confront the reality that it is also this US foreign policy that made China a major actor in the Congo, because the US created that vacuum of corrupt leaders, that China easily came in and was able to bribe the leaders. But that if the United States was choosing the people to be on the side of the people and to elect and let the people elect the leaders who saw their humanity, you will never have actors in the country that can come in and bribe indefinitely the leaders, because those leaders will be somehow held accountable. You will have never heard of a China owning 80% of the minerals in the Congo, those companies in the Congo. And because we now know how they were able to acquire all of those deals, Google Don Gertler. But wasn't Don Gertler that was sent to the White House by Joseph Kabila as a special envoy of the DRC? Wasn't the same Don Gertler that was said in few during Biden administration that they were considering lifting sanction against him? So we all know how things operate, but it will be false to think that by letting the US foreign policy to operate like it has been for the past 30 years, that will bring, I don't even want to talk about Congo, but that will bring safety or security or even economic to the United States itself. That's a bet that I wouldn't take, because China is taking over, that's for sure. And China is taking over because the US was able, through that UN foreign policy, to create that vacuum. And China was able to suck in easily. The Congolese people from the beginning, from the get-go, we taught about English, we taught about the US culture. We are naturally more inclined to the US culture than China. Nobody can explain to me how it makes sense then that the Congolese government was able to deal, or it can easily deal with Chinese government, but not with the US government. Nope, that doesn't make sense in terms of geopolitics, in terms of the history. So that's also what we saw. why the people in the Congo was able to organize. That was, by the way, organized by the presidential party of Felix Tshisekedi, endorsed by the US. They sent people on the streets, people who were, by the way, and rightfully so, angry of what was happening in the Congo, in the eastern part of the Congo. They protested, and that protest turned into violence, but the police doesn't seem or didn't seem to be willing to stop them. So they attacked embassy, including the US embassy. We don't need to get there. How can we stop it? Put an end to propping corrupt leaders in the Congo. Put an end to protecting war criminals, whether they are from Rwanda or from Congo. Impose it yourself. The US should impose itself as a true big beacon of hope, human rights, and democracy. You do that, people won't need to come in the US and risk their lives. You do that, people won't need to go to your rival, because there is obviously a rivalry happening, like a right between BRICS and the G whatever, the G7. People want needs to go to China because the US seems to be really against that aspect. That's why they're doing all of this. This is too much work. This peace agreement is too much work. Just all the president should have done, or could have done, or can do is pick up the phone and say, okay, Paul Kagame, that's it. You're done. I want democracy in your country. I want you to stop supporting these people. Done. Pick up the phone, call the president of the Congo, same thing. Don't piss up people in your own country by talking about a third term. Treat your people with respect. You do that, you don't need to do all these gymnastic to trying to counter China. You won't need to do that. Y'all can listen to me, or you can continue, and in 5 years, in 10 years, we'll have a conversation. In the meantime, China will continue to take over the country, right? And the US can continue to spend money, millions of dollars in Congo, millions of dollars to the CIA operation in the DRC. That's a lot of money that could have been used here in the US. Millions of dollars to some influencers to I don't know how things operate. I'm not gonna dig up things that are already out there, but we're out of time. We're way out of time, but I'm really hoping that this was informative for everyone watching. And I do hope that even, and I do hope, and I know maybe they are, US officials watching this, listening to this, and thinking that, yes, maybe we should listen to the Congolese people more instead of our so called experts who probably never put their feet in the country. They don't even speak the language, who don't know the pain of losing somebody, or having the pain and the anger of seeing your homes being occupied by other people, because you are continuing the cycle of violence, and actually incentivize people by doing nothing, or doing absolutely nothing, if not just protect those who are committing war crimes against humanity. You are only incentivizing the native to organize even in the most violent way, because for them it is the land or death. You only incentivizing people because of, like Laurent Kunda said, there is no life, because they realize that what they had in the Congo is no longer worth to stay, that they have to leave the Congo by boats, by planes, however it means end up in other countries and walk by feet. That they have to come here, overstay their visa. They have to come here and go to school because we were unable as people and also as a government to understand that the solution was never military, it was never to commodify the resources that the Congo has, but the solution was within its people. That the solution was within actually establishing peace. And how do you establish peace? You impose justice. You trial those who have committed crimes. And you'll make that commitment of not supporting those who are entertaining regional instability. So I hope y'all enjoy this show. I hope you enjoyed the line by line breakdown of of the peace accord, and we will continue to talk about Congo. We will never stop. We are friends of the Congo. We will continue to organize, and also we are available to continue to educate and even advise those in powers on any side. Because we are standing on the side of the people. We are standing on the side besides international law. We're standing besides human rights. So I'm going to end with this. Support Friends of the Congo. Donate if you can, your time, your money. We have here 3 ways to support. How you can join the Free Congo movement. Send an urgent letter to U.S. lawmakers, your senators, congressperson, if you are in the U.S., and ask them to stop funding the conflict in the Congo. Do not let your tax money fuel another war overseas. And you are interested in helping to build this global solidarity movement for a free Congo, you can fill out this form. And third, donate to Friends of the Congo because your money, your hardworking money, helps support local indigenous people, communities to continue to live, to continue to organize and sustain themselves. So hope you had a great Friday, that work was not stressful, that, tomorrow is Saturday. Hope you enjoy your weekends, and I will see you guys on next Friday by God's grace. So have a good night, have a good weekend, y'all.